It's not about how you look, it's about how you see.
I most certainly romanticize my life, because why shouldn't we? It feels like a no-brainer. We should make our lives as romantic and as beautiful as we possibly can, and so much of that can be the mindset that we have, can be the way that we decide to look at our lives. And obviously a disclaimer which I have to make is that some lives are so much easier to romanticize than others. Someone should never beat themselves up for not being able to romanticize their lives. But I think it's always a good idea to try and romanticize as much as we can. Honestly, one of my main inspirations for romanticizing my life is A Little Princess, which is my childhood favourite book. And Sarah Crewe loves to pretend, and she creates all of these pretends and these imaginary scenarios where she's a character in it, and one of those is that she's a princess. Here was Lavinia's opportunity. "Ah yes, your royal highness," she said. "We are princesses, I believe. At least one of us is. The school ought to be very fashionable now that Miss Minchin has a princess for a pupil." Sarah started towards her. She looked as if she was going to box her ears. Perhaps she was. Her trick of pretending things was the joy of her life. She never spoke of it to the girls she was not fond of. Her new pretend about being a princess was very near to her heart, and she was shy and sensitive about it. She had meant it to be rather a secret, and here was Lavinia deriding it before nearly all of the school. She felt the blood rush up to her face and tingle in her ears. She only just saved herself. If you were a princess, you did not fly into rages. Her hand dropped, and she stood quite still for a moment. When she spoke, it was in a quiet, steadied voice. She held her head up, and everybody listened to her. "It's true," she said. "Sometimes I do pretend I am a princess. I pretend I am a princess so that I can try and behave like one." Sarah tells stories, but she also says, everything's a story, I'm a story, you're a story. And I think that's the key to romanticizing your life. It's creating a story around it. It's creating a narrative. It's creating a whole world around you. It's us seeing our lives in the best possible way that we can. Our brains can't tell the difference between the reality and what we think is the reality. The brain can think that something we've imagined is actually real. And so if we look at the world through this lens and through this like romanticized, beautiful lens where everything is a story, maybe we can make our brains a better space too. Like, that's what the whole of manifestation is based on. All of that to say, how do you romanticize your life?
Now, this first thing is not something I've heard people talk about before, but don't underestimate just how powerful this can be. It's to turn your to-do list for the next day, your plan for the next day, into something of a story, something which has a narrative to it.
It's not so much about the thing as the way that you're framing the thing and the way that you're thinking about it, the way that you're writing it. And it's the way that you're thinking about it which is affecting and like changing the way that you actually see it. As you frame and write it as something in a story, as something in a book, like use all of your creative writing skills when writing this list, because you want to read the list and you want to read the activity and you want there to be like a feeling to it. If I'm feeling unmotivated, I will often write my to-do list like this. Like, I will say, go downstairs and make a steaming cup of tea. Like, just adding those tiny details to a to-do list can make it more special, make it more wonderful, magical. Even writing an actual story and a narrative of what you want your day to look like can actually be really wonderful for like those days where you wake up and you're really not feeling motivated.
This is my to-do list for tomorrow. Wake up early and greet the morning with the sun. A cup of steaming tea held between palms as you watch the first rays spill into the cobwebs, bringing new life to the world. Read some of Sheriff's Fortnight in September on this, the final day of September. Relish and savour this beautiful month as it parts once more. Write thoughtful recollections, carefully saving them for later.
Study and learn about Charlotte Bronte's exquisite miniature books, holding close the privilege of learning this for the first time. Review and annotate the photographs fervently, seeking out the best of its curiosities. Anticipate seeing them in Haworth in the near future and write notes which will help me appreciate it fully when I do. It's about creating a narrative. And so in the same way, why not make a mood board on Pinterest or like a kind of physical scrapbook one of the kind of feeling that you're trying to embody? Choose photos that evoke something in you, that when you look at them you think, yes, that is what I want, that is the feeling that I'm trying to evoke. But I saw a very interesting TikTok, and I'm going to see if I can find the original creator. I thought this was so excellently like articulated, that so often when we look at photos on Pinterest, the main takeaway becomes like, oh, what can I buy? I love this photo, so what can I buy so that I resemble the person in this photograph? I think that discourse has just become increasingly heightened with the amount of products that are now being sold on Pinterest. But she says, Instead, the key thing is looking at the photograph and thinking, what is it from this photograph that I actually want? What is the feeling that I want? And tracking that. The example that she gave was, if I look at a photo of someone like on a hike, what is it that I want? Oh, I want to be more outdoorsy. I want to be spending more time outdoors, as opposed to I want like a pair of walking boots. And after watching this TikTok, I went away and like tried to implement this into my journal. So I printed off 3 photographs, all beach related, from my Pinterest boards, and then I tracked what it was exactly that I liked about this, what it was that I wanted to draw from it, and then I wrote a story, creative piece inspired by these 3 pictures, which would be an ideal day for if like I were at the seaside, and none of it required consuming and purchasing. It was more about creating a narrative and creating a story in which you could see yourself as part of those photographs. And it doesn't matter that you don't look like you're in those photographs, because the main thing is that like you see it that way. It's about how we see the world.
It's not about how you look, it's about how you see.
It's such a wonderful journaling activity, also so much fun. Something I'd really recommend you doing is going through your Pinterest board, printing out like a few photos which all connect to one theme, and then connecting them and creating like a day, creating an activity, creating a narrative for yourself where you become part of these 3 photographs. So these next 2 things are about creating a media corpus for yourself, because like what we consume of course does have a massive impact on the way that we then see. It's not coincidental that when we read a very good book or when we watch a very good film, we often find ourselves like associating more with the character in the preceding days or weeks. Like we are influenced by these things, and so be so intentional about the material that you're consuming and use media as a way to like cultivate and create that story for yourself. Do not underestimate the power of music. We all know that the music that we listen to can completely change our state of mind, can change the tone of like a situation that we're approaching. It's why music in films is so important, and when you change a track in a film, the vibe can change so dramatically all of a sudden. So create a few Spotify playlists for the different like feelings, the different atmospheres, the different stories that you're trying to create for yourself. You could do something similar with books. I know that there are passages and poems which again just have a very visceral effect on me, and the passages that affect you will be different from those that affect anybody else. So photocopy those passages, photocopy things that make you feel, photocopy passages with a feeling that you want to emulate, and then sammelband them together. So a sammelband is like a collection of printed material from different places. You could just like sew all of this together, you could even like bind it yourself, and then you have this small collection of work that you can read through when you want to. The clothes that we wear honestly do have an effect on the way that we then like hold ourselves and carry ourselves. And it's not necessarily about what the clothing actually looks like, but more how you feel about the clothing. So I know that definitely I've got items of clothing that just because of the story behind the clothing, just because of like the narrative I've attached to the clothing, I feel a particular way when I wear it. When I wear this top, for example, I feel quite studious. I'm also reminded of the National Portrait Gallery because I wore this top when I went to the National Portrait Gallery. Think about how your clothes affect your mood and bring out different parts of your personality, and then maybe wear certain items on certain days depending on the story you're trying to channel. The way that I actually do this, I don't know if I've actually shared this online before, but I organise my wardrobe in a slightly atypical way. So I don't put like my skirts, my shorts, my tops together in certain compartments. Instead, I group my clothes depending on the mood and the way that they make me feel. These are t-shirts and sweatshirts, pajamas and underwear, but all of the other compartments are grouped around style as opposed to category of clothing.
This one, for example, is anything which is casual or whimsical.
A lot of these categories I also don't think would make much sense to anyone other than me. Like, I know exactly what is included in this. It would be anything that I'd wear on a Sunday. I feel like that's the best way to describe it.
And then in this one, I've got anything which is black or white.
So then in the main compartment, which is here, of course, I've got all of my hanging clothes up. This is anything formal. So if I had a formal dinner of some kind, I would know that I could just go straight into this box. But in here is dark academia items. So anything which kind of reminds me of dark academia. Quite a lot at the moment, like this is my biggest box at the moment for autumn. Then in this bottom one, this is anything nautical. So lots of blues and navies in here. For example, I've got like a sailor top, and I really enjoy nautical styles. So I have a whole one for that. And then finally here, this is what I like to call my feathered chandeliers items. Called that because that's the name of my Pinterest board for anything which is slightly romantic, so things like the bees. And I really like this because it means that I can like wear items that align with thought process at that one time. Like, it's only when I really think about it that I realise how inspired this is by Sarah Crew. The idea of pretending, in a weird way, it's like dressing up, but that's what we're doing every single time that we wear anything. We are dressing up. We're dressing up for somebody, so why not dress up for ourselves? And the final thing, and this is the most important thing, is being attentive and being slow and being mindful. Like, the more time we spend on something, the more present we are in a moment, the more attention that we give to a particular task, the more precious and special it becomes. It's like the process of having tea, for example. You can get a tea bag, you can add hot water, you can drink it, and that's a different process to making a cup of tea with a friend and talking as you make it. It's a different process to spending time brewing loose leaf tea and then pouring it through a strainer. Like, it's a different process, and giving time and giving attention to even just small moments and activities, like things that are maybe not that significant overall, changing your mindset around those things can drastically change your whole like mindset on the way that you look at like everything, because our lives are made up of small tiny moments, and it's the small mundane moments that make up the majority of our time on earth, way more than those big elaborate wonderful events and celebrations that we'll have periodically through our lives. So if we can make those small moments magical and special and beautiful, of course that's going to change the tone of our entire life. Focusing on those tiny things, I think, is the absolute key. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that it was helpful. I don't know if helpful is the right word, but thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have more than just a productive week.